Do you want us to mute Cody?
You're not noisy, so you're fine.
Okay.
Yeah, all good. We'll give it one more minute. You're not noisy, so... Give it one more minute. I've got to mute an echo, but then we're good. Let's go. Okay, here we are. We're all together. Welcome, everyone. This is WeHo Reads, Crafting Literary Legacies, and welcome to wherever you are from rain-soaked California. We had yet another a storm move through today. Today it is already March, and it's Women's History Month, and I am so excited to be welcoming four amazing authors in a discussion of literary legacies and histories. And it's just a pleasure to be able to be together online today. Here's how it'll work. I'm going to introduce each of our participating authors with an introductory question about where they're writing from in terms of passions that inform their work, and what they're writing towards in terms of legacies that they want to leave with their work. Following that, I want to get a little more loose and have more of a discussion about their most recent works, and really to start a conversation and dialogue among these amazing authors, who, if I haven't said it yet, are Natashia Deón, Toni Ann Johnson, Malia Márquez, and Warrell. So welcome, welcome, welcome. And I'm so glad you could all be here today. Let's start, Natasha, with you. I would love to introduce you. And then, I mean, well, this has been a while since we've had an event together, but I think it was back in 2020.
Yeah, we were still in COVID. It was crazy. Are we still in it? But you know what I mean. There was no tissue then.
Yeah. It's great to be with you again. I'm going to read your bio, and then I would love your take on where you're writing from and what you're writing towards in your literary career. Natashia Deón, for those who don't know, and you should, is a two-time NAACP Image Award nominee for Outstanding Literature, practicing criminal attorney, and author of the critically acclaimed and widely reviewed novels The Perishing and Grace, which was named a Best Book by the New York Times and awarded Best Debut Novel by the American Library Association's Black Caucus. A PEN America Fellow, Deon has been awarded fellowships and residencies at Yale, Prague's Creative Writing Program, Dickinson House in Belgium, and the Virginia Center for Creative Arts. She is a professor of creative writing at Yale, UCLA, and Antioch University. Her personal essays have been featured in the New York Times, Harper's, the Los Angeles Times, yay, Harper's Bazaar, American Short Fiction, BuzzFeed, and other places. Welcome, Natasha.
Thank you. As I make my own applause in my spot right here. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Cody. We've done events before, and they're always so warm and welcoming, and I'm grateful to be here. But I'll be honest, when I heard the title of our panel, crafting a literary legacy, I had a million things run through my head, because usually when I hear the word legacy, it's, I come from a mega church background, and everybody is building legacies. And I found that, at least I believe now, that legacies are a blind spot, being a legacy builder. Because building legacy with great intention can keep you from seeing yourself, and keep you from being accountable, and keep you from changing if you need to. So in my experience, legacy is something that men love to do, even when it's a lie. This is not calling you out, but I'm just saying, because it's often intentional, and it's loud, and money is thrown at it to puff it up. And the end result is like a life that's carefully scripted for self. And for me, that's not legacy. It's something else. It's goal setting, maybe. It's something, it's a mirror of how you want other people to see you. But for me, The only legacy that matters is three things. First is the legacy of love. Second is the legacy of service to others. And third is the legacy of care for one's family, whatever family looks like to you. So it's important to me when I think about legacy is to understand that it's something that other people will define for me. It's not something that I want to work toward eventually. The seeds are there and people will tell me what my legacy is. So in my work, what I think I'm doing is around social justice, is around humanity, is around love, and is around family, are those things. But it's really, for me, it's not something that I'm crafting. It's something that I am when I stop being afraid of myself. So if I were to give anyone any advice, I would say stop being afraid of yourself. Don't be scared of who you're meant to be in all your uniqueness. And then whatever you're crafting will become evident to other people.
I love that idea of self-reckoning and being able to see yourself clearly and having that, distinction from what you might leave behind and how that's defined by others. I think that's really a very smart way to look at it. Thank you. Well, I mean, already we've got some thought-provoking ideas on the table. Let's keep going. I'm going to ask Toni Ann Johnson next to listen to her bio. She knows herself well, but in case anyone else doesn't, I can read it out for you. Toni Ann Johnson is the winner of the 2021 Flannery O'Connor Award for short fiction with her linked story collection, Light Skin Gone to Waste, selected for the prize and edited by Roxane Gay. Released in October of 2022, the book received a nomination for a 2023 NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literary Work. Johnson's novella Homegoing was a semifinalist for the William Faulkner Wisdom Award in Fiction. It won Accents Publishing's inaugural novella contest in 2020 and was released in May of 2021. The novel Remedy for a Broken Angel was released in 2014, and earned Johnson a 2015 NAACP Image Award nomination for Outstanding Literary Work by a Debut Author. Light Skin Gone to Waste is a wonderful short story collection. Thank you for being here, Toni Ann. And I'll pose the same question to you. Where are you writing from? And what are you working towards in your literary career?
Okay. Well, for this collection and Homegoing, and the new story collection that I'm working on, I was writing from a place, or I am writing from a place of creating entertainment out of my life and family history. So both of those pieces are autobiographical. And as a Black girl and a very light-skinned Black girl in Monroe, it was a real challenge to be different in a white town. It was a struggle to be a child in my insanely crazy family with two parents, both of whom suffered from trauma, childhood trauma. And I've been writing to make sense of my experience, reliving and processing as I work. Each story, though fictionalized, is based on real events. But I'm not a fan of autobiographical stories that are self-pitying or elegiac. And so I have been trying to find humor as I go along. I'm trying to find humor and fun and play within the stories that are difficult. So my work deals with racism, narcissism, and abuse. I was writing to be heard, and especially to drown out the gaslighting that I've received for most of my life. I was constantly being told I should feel lucky and I should be more grateful, and it wasn't that bad. So I was writing to claim my perspective while also bearing in mind that people want to be entertained. So I was trying to write with enough distance so that I could find moments of humor and play and insight within stories that are ultimately about difficult things. And as far as what I'm working toward, I had this answer for this. I've been thinking about it, but here's an example. I was at AWP, and when I was leaving, I was on the plane and I got a Twitter message from a famous author who I've never met, who I really admire. And he said, "I teach the title story of your collection. I'm a fan. I don't think I've ever read work that so vividly captures a world, the reality I know. Thank you for it." And for me, that's like a component of legacy, because that's somebody that I don't even know could see himself in my work, in my very specific, unique to me work, and then share it with students so that it may have a life. That was very satisfying to me. So I think there's, different ways to define legacy, but I would be happy to be taught in MFA programs or in the college, in academia, in the college setting. I do feel like I have a legacy because I've been around a long time. So you read my bio, specific to my fiction, but I was a screenwriter for many years before that. And then I was a playwright before that. So I've had produced plays, and I've had a number of produced films, TV movies, 3 TV movies, historical dramas. They mostly deal with race. Some of them are dance related, but I consider that body of work, my film work, part of my legacy. And then there's the novel, the novella, story collection, and forthcoming stories. I often deal with colorism. Almost all of the work, like past and more recent, includes a search for either family, community, or belonging in some way. A lot of it centers on women and prioritizes women and girls of color. A lot of it includes artists, photographers, painters, musicians, dancers, and singers. So that's true of most of my work. In my fiction, in addition to all that, there are psychological issues, including, well, particularly narcissism, which comes up in all my books and in almost everything that I write. And I refer to trauma, psychology, and the therapeutic process because that's part of my experience. So I started writing because I never saw my own experience reflected in the work that I was seeing when I was a kid. And you almost would have thought that the Black experience was a monolith, and it's not, because of Light Skin, Gone to Waste, and Homegoing, which documents the Arrington specific experience, and it's one that turns race and class inside out. I feel like I exist, and that's my legacy. I've sort of written myself into the world. This upper middle class Black family moves into a white, mostly working class small town in mid-century America, and despite that absurdity, made a life there. So I feel like I'm writing something very, very specific. And I guess that's my legacy, has been to kind of fill a gap where I didn't previously exist.
Mm-hmm. And that gap, I mean, the fact that the story can be shared and have an impact on people, far removed from you, to bring light to that kind of experience is powerful. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we've got a lot to think about already. I'm going to come back to some of this in later questions. I want to bring on Malia. Malia Márquez was born in New Mexico, grew up in New England, and currently lives in Los Angeles with her family. She holds an MFA in creative writing from Antioch University, LA, a BFA from Massachusetts College of Art and Design, and teaches with the UCLA Extension Writers Program. Woohoo! Her award-winning first novel, This Fierce Blood, was published by Acre Books in 2021. Welcome, Malia.
Thank you so much. I feel so honored and grateful to be here. So legacy, when I first saw that word, it made me feel like very seen, to be included, just because when I began thinking about my book, This Fierce Blood, I was really thinking about overlooked and lost legacies. So not necessarily my own legacy. I can't imagine what that will end up being. But in my work, generally, I'm very interested in ideas around sort of like synthesizing polarizations or opposites, bringing together, blending, mixing. I come from a very, blended background in terms of class and race and, gender, sexuality, all those things. And so I'm just interested in like that kind of mixing things in a way that maybe creates something unexpected or new. Highbrow, lowbrow in terms of literature. I'm a huge fan of that. Cultures and classes, science and spirituality is an interest of mine. Humans and nature, ecology. And just kind of like, I think those ideas are all centered around thinking about and exploring what divides or boundaries groups and people. And while I'm not like interested in writing some kind of utopian vision of the world, I feel like sometimes, it's useful to explore where divisions are rooted in social and ideological constructions, where they're useful and where they're not. Not that there are any answers, but just, taking that leap into the unknown and into those kind of murky waters. So that's kind of where my work comes from.
I love that idea of as social evolution progresses and changes and blends, that literature is going to reflect that, and it could reflect that with an intention that you bring to it of taking the polarities and bringing them into a new form we haven't seen before. Yeah,
yeah,
that's exciting. Laura is here. Laura Warrell has been published in Lit Hub, the Los Angeles Review of Books, Huffington Post, The Rumpus, and The Writer. Her first novel, Sweet, Soft, Plenty Rhythm, was listed as a must-read by the Washington Post, People Magazine, Oprah Quarterly, the Boston Globe, Lit Hub, and The Root, among others, and has been nominated for the Barnes & Noble Discover Pick and Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction, and it is a finalist for the PEN/Faulkner Award for Fiction. Fingers crossed. Laura graduated from the creative writing program at the Vermont College of Fine Arts. She has attended residencies at the Bread Loaf Writers Conference and the Tin House Writers Workshop. Welcome, Laura. Where are you writing from? What are you writing toward?
Thank you, Cody. And I'm really excited to be on this panel. I have been wanting to be on a panel with these writers for a long time, so I'm really excited to be here. And I have been thinking about legacy and this topic since you emailed me. And I don't know if I have an answer that I am not going to want to revise a week from now. But what I will say is, when I first started thinking about it, I thought, legacy, I'm just trying to get books in the world at this point. And it's been so hard to get this first book in the world. And the work around promoting it and building a career and navigating publishing and the community and the wonderful moments of joy and triumph and excitement that, and along with those moments of anxiety and strangeness and really having to orient yourself into this experience. I haven't necessarily come up for air to think long term. So that was one of my first reactions. And the second is something similar to what Natasha said, which is, I imagine that someone else is going to decide what my legacy is. If I have one, I wonder if we all sort of get one in the end, or if we just kind of pop in, do our work, and then disappear. That's so tragic sounding, but you see what I mean. But what I'm writing toward, I'm going to tell you two things. The first piece is, I was watching that movie She Said about the journalists who brought down Harvey Weinstein. I love those kinds of stories, journalists doing their work. And I had this welling in my chest and was like, it's women that I want to write about. It's those stories that I want to tell. When I am watching a film, when I'm reading a story, when I'm experiencing other human beings, it's women's stories that just get me. And so as I've been promoting this book and talking about the book, I've gotten people who are excited about it. I've got people who are frustrated by what they see as these women being in disempowered situations, that they're in a relationship with a guy who's a womanizer. We all have a lot of feelings around that. And I had this moment of realization that disempowered people, right, or inviting disempowered people to empower themselves through the plot that I'm putting them through. And I want to do that with all of my characters, but particularly with my female characters. And this other story that I will tell you is I was doing a reading of an essay that I wrote that was actually published in the Rumpus, although they published it and I think people thought it was a story, but that, well, we can cuss, right? That shit happened. I was with my ex-husband who was French, and we were at a swimming pool and there was a very young, pretty woman there that he was staring at so aggressively. I mean, I'm not a jealous person, but there's a limit, right? He was staring at her so aggressively that she swam toward him in the pool, and I had kind of disappeared. It was very, very devastating. I wrote an essay about it, and then I read it publicly. And a man came up to me and said, I get it. And that was the kind of moment that I'm writing toward, which is I'm writing this world as I see it, as I experience it, whether I'm writing about people of color and not the voices that we're not hearing from, the stories that we're not hearing, whether I'm writing about women, and in the case of this book, the side of a very often discussed relationship, this womanizing relationship, talking about the other side of it. I want to tell the stories about the people that we don't hear from, the perspectives that we don't hear from, so that hopefully people will finish reading whatever it is I've written and go, oh, I get it. And legacy feels like a too big of a word to wrap around that, but that's what I'm trying to do. And I find whether I write essays or write fiction, the goal is to sort of say it like I see it and let the reader decide what it means about our world, our lives, our relationships, and themselves. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how long I can sustain this if I get to have a legacy, but I don't know if I'm going to be the one who decides what it is.
Yeah. And that question, can a legacy be revised? Mm-hmm. Right? Do you have power to revise it? That's interesting. I want to stick with you for a little bit and talk more about Sweet Soft Plenty Rhythm. That scene that you just shared with us, I recognize with Circus and Maggie. Mm-hmm. But maybe for the viewers who are now going to go to the library and the bookstore and pick up your book, maybe give us a little intro. And I feel like, there's this question, like Circus is an important character, but the women around him in his life who intersect at various points, I mean, maybe those are the real main characters, but maybe help the audience understand kind of what this book is about.
Sure. So I'll show it. I feel like such a
yay.
You've probably seen it somewhere.
Hold it up for a second longer. I mean, I feel like what I love about the illustration on this cover is that it kind of captures that movement of jazz, right? Music is so important to the book.
I loved it. When they sent me the cover, I was like, we're done. I'm happy. So Sweet Soft Plenty Rhythm is about the women in a womanizing jazz musician's life. Womanizer, Casanova, fuckboy, that has been tossed at me as I've been promoting the book. But the focus is on the women. So in the very first chapter, He is on vacation with a woman named Maggie, who is a drummer. And she tells him that she's pregnant, and he abandons her. They're in Miami. He goes back to Boston where the book takes place. And then the subsequent chapters are told from the different women's perspectives that he connects with as he's trying to sort of avoid that responsibility. So he also has a daughter who's 14, 15 years old, who is longing for a relationship with a father who is mostly absent, a very dynamic, sort of sexy, charismatic figure who she doesn't have a lot of access to at a crucial point in her life where she's trying to figure out who she is as a woman, as a sexual being. She's a mixed race woman like I was. And so that features heavily into her journey. He also has an ex-wife named Pia, Coco's mother, who is carrying a torch and is kind of struggling with who she is in the world, with a man that is, again, not present for her in the way that she needs. We've got Maggie, who is the woman who is pregnant. And then we have a lot of other women that he meets. So these are women that he reconnects with. These are women he picks up in bars. These are just, if you know any playboys, whatever you call them in your life, you know how they operate, one woman to the next. And we are following him as he goes from one woman to the next. But as I said, it's from the women's perspective. And when I was reading it, writing it, or thinking about it, actually, I was reading a book, and I don't know if I should say what it was. You can tell me, Cody, about a womanizer written by a man from the perspective of the man. And I said, I have seen this story a million times, and these women are just serving his plot. A lot of them, it's a well-written book. I'm not knocking it, but we've seen it. I want to know what's going on with them. I want to know what's going on when he leaves to his next thing. What's going on in their lives? How are they feeling, right? Outside of what they're showing him that they feel. And so that's what I decided to write. And so Sweets off plenty of rhythm.
Yeah, I appreciated how, each of those characters was fully imagined and in the midst of their own drama, really, right, about stuff that was happening in their lives, things that they were dealing with. And Circus may come across as a cipher because he's so charismatic, like you're like, what's happening under the surface? But I'm not sure it really matters because the women's stories are the ones that are front and center. Yeah.
And that's exactly why I wanted to write it. I think that a lot of times, and it goes back to the story I was saying with this guy who came up to me at the reading. He's probably been in a similar situation, right? And the idea is, there's a lot going on when you're not there, right? When you leave, she's got a life, she's got family, she's got relationships, she's got a complex, hodgepodge of feelings about you and what she's doing. And that's what I wanted to show.
Yeah. Thank you. Let's talk about This Fierce Blood next, Malia. I think maybe we could start with structure, because it's interesting that you've got, and this may become a theme throughout today's discussion, two different time periods that are, interrelated to one another.
Yes. So This Fierce Blood centers on 3 women in a family. And as you're saying, it is divided into 3 distinct narrative sections that all kind of stay with each of those women. It takes place over the course of about a little more than 100 years. And it's interesting because I actually wrote the book not divided into 3 distinct sections. That came during the revision process, when I was getting a lot of feedback from readers that there were so many people and they were having a hard time keeping track. And so my intention going in was to really write how these stories are interwoven, what is passed between generations, what gets lost, what sort of remains but changes in terms of what it looks like further down the line. So I wanted to write a very cyclical kind of a book, but then I realized that was just too confusing, too convoluted. And when I divided it into 3 sections, it just became itself, it clarified, but it was written as an interwoven narrative. And my original inspiration as well was centering feminine stories. And my main sort of like close third narrators were these 3 women, but feminine stories, I also include not just women's stories, but more feminine in terms of quality and principles. So those more quiet stories, the everyday things that don't get written about in books. It's not a war story, it's not the sort of flashy, dramatic, sort of like sexy stuff. It's like more the quiet, like what happens every day and what's the emotional journey. What's a hero or a heroine? What does it take to do that or to overcome things? And to connect these 3 stories, I kind of used a magical realism speculative element, which in my book took the form of a mountain lion. So we can all remember P22, Roman peace, P22. And I was I was reading a lot of sort of nonfiction essays. So it's just incorporating ideas about science and spirituality, as I said before, culture and ecology. Assimilation and enclavement was a big idea, central idea for me. And that came out of my own family stories, just because my family in the Southwest, they're mixed Indigenous and Chicano, and they really assimilated, but also, a lot of stuff gets passed through, but it's not called the same thing any longer. It might look the same, but it's not called the same thing. It takes on these different forms. And I thought that was really both sad and beautiful. And so I wanted to sort of create the record of that and just kind of delve into like what happened with them. So yeah, the book was inspired by women in my family and by family stories. But I ended up more writing it for them than about them. And that felt like a really powerful decision to not cleave to like the actual events and people that were in the past. And part of that is because some of those stories are maybe not so transcendental. They didn't have the choices. They didn't come through in the end necessarily in the way that I really wanted my characters to come through and stay close to their truths. And so that was my process.
Yeah, what you were saying earlier about kind of the quiet and the feminine and the stories that maybe, aren't flashy with heroes and all of that reminded me a lot of Ursula K. Le Guin and how, we have this idea of what's the big narrative, but there are many different forms and shapes and subjects that we can put in our stories. And, yours is evidence of that. Thank you. Toni Ann, we talked a little bit about the Arringtons, and I think one of the differences here with your book compared to these other authors' books is that it is not a novel. It is linked short stories, right? And I'm wondering, you may have spoken about this before, but your decision to structure it that way.
It was always meant to be a story collection. There was a period where I was asked to make it a novel, and it really didn't work. Because it wasn't conceived that way. It was conceived as episodes in this family's life. It wasn't conceived with one overarching, goal for anybody. So it just didn't work as a novel. I think that it gives you the feeling of a novel because the characters are consistent. And I feel like you are pulled through the story with some degree of what you might get in a novel. We are sort of tracking what happens with Maddie, like how is she going to survive? Who is she going to turn out to be? I think that pulls through the novel, but it doesn't have, one character who wants something very specific that they're reaching for. And so it was turned into a novel. In order to submit it to the Flannery O'Connor Award, I turned it back into what I wanted. I never wanted it to be a novel, but according to my agent, short story collections, it wasn't going to sell. It wasn't as commercially viable. I actually don't care about that. What I care about is the authenticity of the work and saying what I want to say and putting my work out there in the way that I want it to be. So I was fine with it being a small short story collection. And this is the book. Yay. And that's me at 15.
Oh, wow.
A picture taken by one of my best friends from Monroe, Tracy Stora, whom I'm still friends with. So
Nice.
You want me to tell you more about the book, or you want to?
I want to ask about the episodic nature of it, and is there a different feeling for you if you're trying to string together a big arc versus a different feeling when you're dealing with episode by episode? Like, does that change something for you?
Absolutely. I was a professional screenwriter. I was trained to write outlines that had an act structure. So I was trained to start with a protagonist who wants something, and we find out what that is in Act 1. Then they go into Act 2 and they're pursuing that thing. And at the same time, there's an inner need that needs to be addressed. And as we go through Act 2, we're following the character whose need is becoming more apparent to them. And then once, towards the end of Act 2 into Act 3, that's when that is revealed. There's a self-revelation. And then in Act 3, there's a climax. This book never had that structure, never. It was always, this is Phil's perspective. This is Maddie's perspective. This is Velma's perspective. This is Gert, it just wasn't that. It wasn't that. And to try to force it into that, it just didn't work. So I love linked story collections. Like, I love that form, and I like novels as well, but this just wasn't a novel. If I'm going to be telling the story of my family, I wouldn't, it would be, the novel would be like, I don't know, like 1,000 pages. So I'm taking pieces of these stories and events. It was everything was inspired by events that I remembered that were often like what I thought was the worst thing that could ever happen to me. So each event for me was very significant. And the stuff that I wasn't in, I tried to examine, what's the most significant, painful, worst thing that's happened to them, so, yeah. But that's the nature of short stories. That's not what novels do. So it was not that.
Yeah, fascinating. Natasha, let's talk about The Perishing.
Hey, okay.
Which I can see behind you.
Oh,
on the wall. Yes. Another beautiful, beautiful cover. Also some speculative elements, also some time period placement playing with. Tell us more.
Sure. So for me, The Perishing is a love story. It's a love story about a woman chasing love through time. But although she's always Black, she's not always a woman. Even though there's that feminine quality of herself. So when I talked about legacy just a minute ago, about other people defining it for you. I've been on so many fantasy panels that I'm not equipped for at all because other people see it as, fantasy. And for me, it's just love. So Toni Ann said a great thing, like, where do we start our stories? What is it based on? Whether it's based on experience with the 3-act structure, or Laura, when she's talking about her husband, this woman swimming toward her man without a punch in the face. I mean, one of them, even though I don't condone violence, or Malia talking about the femininity and the feminism. For me, everything starts in either love or fear. So, and maybe that's, I've been practicing and a practicing attorney for over 20 years in California. And a lot of that time is criminal law. So it seems like everything is based on fear or love, including love of self. So when I think about humanity, I always tend to start there. So in The Perishing, with this woman who's chasing love through time, in every life, she lives new lives. And in every life, she doesn't remember who she was. So she has to start all over again. And the people that she's supposed to find and love find her. The people that aren't, there's also bad people who want to take that ability to travel through time. But for me, I never set out to write a fantasy novel. It started a dream of love. I had a dream that I was in love with a man who was Chinese, and I knew it was Los Angeles in this dream. It was like, I woke up at 3 a.m. I was crying. I was telling my husband, I have to research what I just saw because it felt so real. I was in love in this dream. I was a white passing Black woman, and I loved this man, and he was a doctor, and he was murdered. And the details were so clear to me in the dream, like the adobe, the architecture. I knew it was LA. I knew it was in the 1800s. And when I woke up, I started Googling it. And I discovered, in the way that Columbus discovers, I found out about the Chinese massacre in the 1800s. I think it was 1876. And it felt so real to me. And I knew I wanted to include that memory, what felt like a memory, even though it was a dream, in my story. But I wanted to continue where I left off at Gray. So my first novel ended at a few years past the Civil War. So I knew I wanted to be in the early 1900s, and which would have taken The Perishing back in time, and I didn't want to do that. So in order to create the possibility to have this Black woman start in the 1930s and still be able to remember something that happened in the 1800s, like the murder of her lover, I knew that I needed to make it a time traveling novel. So it was a device to tell the story that I really wanted to tell, which ended up being chapter 29 of the book. And my editor said, Natasha, do we have to have this chapter? I was like, damn it, this is the reason I wrote this book. Yes, this is for me. So in the epigraph, that's what I did to show it was for me, because all the time, when you're service minded, you're doing things for other people, doing it to speak to even your ancestors. I'm doing it to honor my ancestors. I'm doing it to honor the past or rescue people from, histories, legacies from the past. But I wanted to do it for me. So this book is very much something that I wanted to do. And when I talk about how people will decide what that legacy is, it's happening now, even in this conversation, when you're saying, kind of fantasy. For me, it was just reality. That's what I saw. What happened was, so it wasn't like, ooh, this is fantasy. It was real to me.
Yeah, and the time period also stretched the 30s, like the mid-war period. Was there another dream, or was there something that attracted you to that time period as well?
Well, I didn't want to write war again. So in my first novel, Grace, I'm dealing with the Civil War. So I wanted to be between wars, between World War I and between World War II, during the golden age of Hollywood, where we're like, where are all the Black people? Where are all the people of color? Because LA has always been brown. Mm-hmm. It was founded by brown people, So I wanted to talk about that history, and I also wanted to be able to move forward. I wanted her to be able to talk to herself in the future. So it goes as far as the 1990s with Latasha Harlins. And that was a time when I was in LA. Natasha was similar to my name. I was Natasha, she was Latasha. If you don't know what happened there, it was during the time of Rodney King, when he was beaten, and not very long after, Latasha Harlins was murdered by a Korean grocer. And it was part of the reason for the LA riots. And a lot of people forget about her. I don't forget about her because our names were very similar. My maiden name was Harris. She was Harlins. I was like, oh my God, they killed me. So it was very traumatic, but I wanted to talk about that moment as a part of healing as well. So yeah, there was a lot that I wanted to cover, and time travel and love gave me a way to do that.
I love that. I love that. I need to interrupt this portion for a second to do our thank you to the sponsors. But before we do that, I want to plant a little seed in your mind. If you could think about one question you want to ask each other, and let that stew for a little bit. Now that we've heard a lot about the origins of your stories, what you're writing towards, we'll come back to that. But for now, I just want to thank the City of West Hollywood for presenting this program, for making this possible. The UCLA Extension Writers Program and Poets and Writers for additional financial support, and our media partners, BookSoup, bookshop.org, and the LA Review of Books for helping us get the word out and share information about this program. We have the arts coordinator from the City of West Hollywood, Mike Che, who's going to come on, I believe, and give us a little bit about the series and also the land acknowledgement.
Thank you so much, Cody, and thank you everybody for joining us tonight. As Cody mentioned, WeHo Reads is a program that is presented by the City of West Hollywood, and I'd like to take a moment to respectfully acknowledge that the land that is currently known as the City of West Hollywood is the occupied, unceded, seized territory of the Gabrielino, Tongva, and Kizh peoples. We honor and pay respect to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of these lands. I know that we have people joining us from all over the country. I saw in the chat on YouTube that Wendy is joining us from Iowa City. I ask that you all take a moment to find out who the original inhabitants of the lands where you are right now by visiting native-land.ca and honoring them. Thank you to Cody for organizing this. You do a fabulous job. And of course, our city council is so supportive of the arts. They fund this every year. And we're so thankful that they provide that support for us to be able to bring together such wonderful authors and poets to present and share their knowledge and their words. Thank you to the readers. You're all fabulous. It is Women's History Month, and we have such a wonderful panel of strong female writers. I'm so thankful that you're all joining us. Next month is April, which is Poetry Month. We've got a lot planned in the City of West Hollywood. Every year we hang up banners that honor living poets. I do see in the audience Charlie Jensen is here. He'll be one of the new poets that's honored on the banners next month. And thank you for all of your work with the UCLA Writers Extension Program. And then we also have a wonderful WeHo Reads event that is being curated by our poet laureate, Brian Sonia Wallace. It's going to be a poetry spa day. Please save the date of April 26th. It's going to be in West Hollywood at the West Hollywood Park Aquatics and Recreation Center. And it's going to be a poetry spa day where you can get poetry related fake spa services. It'll be very exciting. So please join us in person for that. I don't believe we have any of our council here today to say any words. It is Women's History Month, and there's another event that's happening tonight. But I do want to say thank you once again to all of our readers, and thank you, Cody, for organizing this.
Thank you, Mike. You make it possible. Appreciate it. And now back to our regularly scheduled programming. So I, of course, prepared many, many, many questions for our guests, but I wanted to take a little step back. It's Women's History Month, and I don't need to be talking that much. To say if there's questions or discussions, topics you want to address with each other, then let's do that.
I can start with something sort of fun, maybe fun. I'm going to be on another panel at an event with Natasha, and we were talking about questions that we could ask each other. And one of the questions that came up got us going for a very long time, so it might be a fun way to talk with each other. A piece of reader feedback, so readers, that surprised you in any way, whether it was frustrating and shocking or whether it was exciting and warm, reader feedback that's been impactful in some way.
I will just say that one thing that has surprised me about reader feedback is, and also validated, is just people resonating with the stories and seeing themselves in the stories. That's just like the best response ever. Yeah, that's it. That's something that and I guess the reason that surprised me is because I feel like I was writing a very specific story and it was really centered around my own family. And so to see it sort of transmuted into that more universal form and have it have that effect was really exciting.
Okay. I have a friend, a middle-aged white man who read the book and really liked it. But there's a story that's from a 6-year-old Black girl's point of view. And it's a story where her best friend is a white boy who doesn't realize that she's Black. She's very light-skinned. And so he doesn't get it until some neighborhood bullies call her the N-word. And then her friend is kind of shocked and he knows what the N-word is. She's not even really sure what it is. And it ends their friendship. And this man told me that he was shocked that I put him in the head of this little girl. And he actually felt like he could understand what it felt like to have that experience, to be rejected for being different, which he hadn't really experienced in his life. And so that was a nice surprise for me, that somebody who might not think that the book is for them could find something in the book that does enlighten them in some way.
That is such a great question, Laura, because it's like I don't. Part of me is just like, oh, do I want to say that? Oh, but that's so precious. Oh, do I want to say that? Oh no. I think the time that I'll just talk about the perishing. So recently, one of the conversations that I had with my editor, and this is for writers that are listening especially. The voice that I had for the perishing, I know I wanted it to be a grown woman. It needed to be grown. And then I remember having the conversation with, because I have like, not what I would consider wise words, but pieces of advice. My narrator is able to give that to her old self. So she's talking about what she regrets, what she wish she would have known in this life or the last life or the life before that one. And there was a point where I had to say, I'm not a 26-year-old writer. I am a grown ass woman. And there's some things that I feel like I want to say. if God or the universe or whoever is giving me a second chance to write a book that people are going to read, I want to say the things that were important to me, that helped me. And I want this character to say that. So I don't want her to, because the book opens with Lou, who is like 16 years old. So I didn't want it to be her advice to the world. Not that she's not wise as a 16-year-old, but there's a huge difference between 16 and 40 something or eternal, right? So I wanted to be able to do that. And recently I went to an event in this really beautiful mansion. And I remember going there and these women, and I felt so separate from everyone. Like I was like, I don't have this kind of money. It's weird. There's parking attendants. I'm rolling in my Mini, coming to this event, and they want to hear something that I have to say. Obviously, they've done it all right because they live on this block in these massive homes. But I remember two women came up to me just clutching the book in their chest. They opened it up and there's just highlighter all inside the perishing, and then little tabs and things like that. And she was like, look, and then another one had what do you call it? The iPad, and it was all highlighted. She goes, these are all the notes. I needed to hear these things. And that was the first time I felt like I did it right. I did what I wanted to do, and it's helping other people. And that meant a lot to me.
Laura, how about you? Your own question reflected back.
Darn. I guess what I would say is the number of people who came up to me and said, Circus, the male character, is my dad, is my uncle, is my brother, is my whatever. The number of women who said, thank you for writing this. And I think in part because I think there are lots of situations that women find themselves in that are real and common, but that we are made to feel shame for being in. And one of them is when we're in relationships that aren't perfect. I think we get a lot of blame for that. And so a lot of women have said, and they often say, I'm so glad I'm past that. And I hope they really are. But the funniest thing is the number of men who've come up to me and said, yeah, I think I'm like your character. I think I'm like Circus Palmer. And I'm like, you should read the whole thing. In fact, I remember to one guy, he was really as he was reading the book, he was texting me. And he started by saying, yeah, I'm really like Circus Palmer. And he'd gotten to some section and sent me another message to let me know he still thinks he's like Circus Palmer. And I said, he's not aspirational. It's not, his behavior is not, you're missing something.
Not something to brag about.
Right, exactly. He's not the hero. But anyway, as he kept reading, I eventually got a message. It was like, I'm glad to see that there's a chasm between me and Circus Palmer. Yeah, I was like, yeah, read the book first. But anyway, that's been kind of fun, is how many men are like, yeah, I gotta do something about it. I'm just like this guy. So maybe it's a good thing.
The promise and peril of reading yourself into stories.
Exactly.
Not knowing yet how they end.
Exactly.
I want to maybe pick up on or continue with this idea of the characters that you're writing, the women that you're writing, and what was important for you to bring to them, or to bring out of them, or to show in terms of their experience.
Me or anyone?
You first, Laura.
I'm sorry, I have a cat.
Oh, and also hello to the cat.
Sorry, I was hoping that she would go under the radar. So I can answer that, I think, kind of quickly. One of my, or the easiest way to answer is to say, when I thought of, there are about 8 to 10 female perspectives in this book. 2 of them are kind of embedded in other chapters from other characters' perspectives, but there are about 8 women who they get at least one chapter. And one of the ways I came up with these different characters was to think about the types of women who are often in stories like this, and to flesh them out. So one character in particular who is one of the fan favorites is named Peach. She's a bartender. She's a woman that Circus picks up in a bar. She's a bartender. And she's one of those women who's beautiful. She's got a great body. She's very sexy. She inhabits her body very comfortably. And those types of women are very often sort of cast aside as easily dismissible because of how they look, the urges that they may provoke, and because, you know, they just aren't taken very seriously. They're sort of the bimbo, and I'm using air quotes because that's not a word I like. And I wanted to retrieve that character. I wanted to show her humanity and dimension and richness. And even if she's not, you know, reading Russian literature, that doesn't mean that, you know, she should be cast aside. And so one of the things I did when I came up with these characters was to think about these types of stories and the types of women we see in them, so that I could build them out, because very often I don't think that they're fully fleshed out. They're not given a lot of dimension, and they don't have much of a plot of their own. So that's what I wanted to give them.
For me, I think I wanted to bring out, so again, going back to love and fear and also violence. Women have so much violence. We live every day worried about violence. A friend of mine, I think it was Rebecca Solnit, who said, you know, men don't want to be embarrassed by their woman. A woman doesn't want to be killed by her man. So that's sort of the difference. And I mean, that's, you know, we're talking about a heterosexual relationship, but whether you are or not, whatever, you know, you're a trans woman or a woman, whatever that is, there's a certain amount of violence that you have to expect. So it was important for me to show a woman, a girl who is surviving, and how she survives through violence to a place where she's the victor. She wins the fist fight. She wins, not, you know, not that would happen all the time in reality, but I wanted her to win against violence. And that's the story that I wanted to write about and talk about.
I'll go. I wrote about the character Velma is not really likable, but she's funny. She's got a fun voice, but she is a raging narcissist. And she's kind of mean. And from her perspective, she's mean because her husband is kind of like Circus Palmer. He's a philanderer, a womanizer. He chases specifically white women in the town, which everybody knows about because they're the only Black professional family in the town. So, and he belongs to the tennis club. So when he's, you know, having affairs and stuff, it's very embarrassing to Wilma. But what I was doing with that character, and then she has a white maid, Gertie, who she hires so that she can go back to work because she hates being a housewife. Gertie also has a narcissistic mother. And I think what's interesting about the Gertie-Velma relationship is that Velma is very critical of what she knows about Gertie's mother, who's very abusive and cruel to Gertie, but she doesn't recognize that she's just like that. She too is narcissistic. And so there's this back and forth thematically in that particular story. It's from Velma's point of view and Gertie's point of view, but I wasn't aware that that's what I was doing. I was really just writing the truth. But then I saw, wow, this like is structured so well, because it's like Velma can have empathy for somebody else, but she can't have it for her own child. And she can recognize poor behavior in another woman, but she can't recognize it in herself. And that was authentic to me. So I think sometimes, like when we're writing about women, we feel like the women characters have to be likable. But I like a character who's a little bit difficult sometimes. I think they're kind of fun.
So all three of my main characters, they're mothers, and they're all three faced with like a critical juncture in their life, some challenge, in which they experience extreme pressure to conform to externally imposed expectations or ideas about who they should be or what they should do. So it's about conditioning and sort of the psychological and emotional process of coping with that, and with hopefully moving through that and coming out with a sort of clear, authentic, personally driven action, which is not always the case, but that was what I was exploring with all three of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's this theme recurring also of what do you do with the scenario you're in as a character, especially if you don't necessarily have the power or as much power. Shifting a little bit back to yourself as an author, and thinking about maybe where you want to take it. Do you know what comes next, or are you struck by inspiration? Like, how do you decide kind of what path you're taking on in your writing life?
I do. And I think because I'm a little bit older than everybody else, when you get to a certain age, you realize, oh, I have like this much time left to actually write. And so because I'm at that point in my writing life, I feel like I do need to make those choices, and I do need to think about legacy, and I actually can define it for myself. There's one of your questions that I was thinking about was talking about looking at other legacies, and I think about August Wilson, who got sick when he was, I guess, in his 50s, but he has this body of 10 plays that are all set in Pittsburgh, all about Black life, each in a different decade, and that's very specific and intentional. And yes, it's a man. Natashia said, like, men tend to do that. But I don't think that's a bad thing, because by the time he was in his 50s, time was running out. He got sick and he died at 60. But before he died, he was able to leave, this complete set of plays, all about, a very specific place about Black life. And I feel like it's okay as you get older to make that decision. I think when you're younger, you're still trying to figure it out, and you are writing, what occurs to you, I think, via inspiration. But somewhere in your late 50s, something starts to shift, and you're like, okay, maybe I can write until I'm 80, so I better figure this out and start planning. And so I have done that. So I know what my next 2 books are, and I know what I want to explore. And yes, I think I do have the freedom to change my mind, but I like the models of, like, for example, Elena Ferrante, who wrote, 4 novels, the Neapolitan novels, about the same 2 women. And every time you think that she couldn't possibly get any more out of this relationship, there's another book, and it's like more intriguing and compelling. I think that's another approach to, like, be very specific and intentional, and to go deep into that, and to mine what you haven't found already, to keep going. And so that's something that interests me.
That's interesting that this idea of the familiar material that you can use to create new stories. Like, the sculptor with the same clay can make many different pots or whatever they're going to sculpt. Yeah, that's interesting, because I wonder if some authors, like going to different places, right? Different genres or different shapes of stories as they evolve in their careers. But I'd love to hear from each of the rest of you. Like, how do you know what path you're taking? Do you try?
Oh, go ahead.
Do you know, Cody, your screen went out.
Oh, thank you for letting me know. I'm still here. I'll fix that.
What you were saying was just making me think of Ocean Vuong has this great video where he talks about teaching and writing, and how he doesn't ever assume that another book or another project is on the way. It's not something he takes for granted. And that felt very liberating to me. I've had so many moments and times in which, I felt like I would never write again. Like, this is the last thing, it's like burnout happens, it's real. And I just feel like I have faith that more stories will come, but I love that idea that we can't assume that they will, and just sort of allowing them to happen by grace. And I guess I would just also piggyback on that question, because I'm always curious to know, when I talk to other writers, how do you move through that, and how do you get out of those stuck places? And what does that look like for you?
Natasha, it looked like you were ready, so I was gonna defer to you if you wanted to go next.
I can go. I'm always ready. I'm like, what? No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just gonna say, I just had a residency. My UCLA extension residency was this past weekend, and one thing that I talk to my students about, no matter what class I'm in, is if no one writes the story you've been given, if you don't finish, if you die, your story dies with you, or your stories die with you. So I'm always very much aware of that. All of us have that same appointment coming up, right? But when I was 18, the week that I graduated college, my undergrad from Cal State Long Beach, I was attacked. And I remember sitting there being choked out, thinking, today I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die today. And then what I was thinking about were the things that I loved, and also the fear that I wasn't gonna make it out. Again, when I was 30 years old, and I gave birth to my daughter, and I almost died in childbirth because of all the issues that go on with Black women in our great state and around the nation. And I thought I was going to die then. I was hospitalized for 2 weeks after my daughter was born. I couldn't touch her. I couldn't hold her. I couldn't breastfeed her because I was the patient. So all these times, there's been moments like that. And in close calls with, like I said, I do criminal defense. So sometimes with my clients, I don't know. I think that I don't know that I'm going to make it out of this moment. And it's real. It's not like I'm just putting on airs. Like, this is legit. I'm not going to make it, and I'm in this position. And it allowed me to write a sentence that's in the perishing, that we're all on the verge of somebody else's violence. And I always think that way. So I don't think that I have time. And when I love that Toni Ann is bringing up, the life issue, and from her perspective, how much time she has left. I think that I may not, if I get through this interview, I don't know that I'm going to wake up in the morning. So from my view of the world, every story that I get to finish is a gift. So I'm writing every day like I'm not going to have another day, but sometimes I have to say, this is all I can do today. This is it. Am I happy? This is the most I can do today. Now I have to rest. So I have to give myself, when Malia says grace, I'm thinking I have to give myself grace. I have to say, this is all that I can do today. And I think that's important in this journey. So I do think ahead sometimes, but I don't think that I have more than that story that I'm writing. I never thought after Grace there would be The Perishing. I never thought after The Perishing it would be the book that I'm working on now, and that I've already gotten an award for it. And it hasn't even, I've only written the first 80 pages. So things like that, like I don't know that it's coming. I don't know, and I'm just grateful. I just try to stay grateful.
That's really beautiful. You know, I've been listening to all of you, and again, I may not be sure of my answer, but what I'm thinking is that writing has always, it's my way of coping with life, understanding myself and the experiences that happened to me and the world around me. And I feel like, and this kind of goes back to the question about legacy. I love the question, but I don't think I'm thinking about it. I don't think I'm thinking about legacy. I think I'm thinking about how to find joy and meaning and purpose in my life, and writing does that for me. And as I said, how to interpret my own existence and deal with the world around me. And what I find when inspiration comes is that often I think what it is that curiosities that I didn't know I had are piqued. I meet somebody, or I hear somebody else's view of the world, or a story or a situation that I just want to discover. And again, I think that this, I forget how you phrased it, Cody, but I feel as a writer kind of unformed, and I don't mean on a craft level. I just mean that I'm like just drawn to the next curiosity or obsession or whatever. And it's not usually about me. It's about something that I want to explore about living. And so I am working on the next book, and this is exactly what happened. Some light bulb went off from a conversation that I had, and like, oh, what's that about? Writing to me is in the same category as travel. When I travel, I'm just like, they plop me somewhere and like, what's over there? Oh, wow, look at that thing that went by. I want to go over there. I'm the same as a writer. I don't think I'm building anything, and maybe that's a mistake. I think I'm just gravitating toward aspects of life that intrigue me, and then I'm sitting there with them and I'm exploring them, and then something else comes up. Fortunately, so far, ideas are coming. The one thing that's happening with me with aging is I'm writing really slowly. I'm like, when I was young, I was like, boo, 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 novel's done in, in a year. And now I'm like, this paragraph has taken me about 6 weeks. But I'm trying to enjoy it. It's something that I feel really strongly about is, as a creative person, I feel like in our culture, in our capitalist culture, et cetera, finishing things and having this number of words by a certain number of time robs us of the free joy and pleasure that we have in creating. And so I'm trying to allow myself to take the time that the work needs, despite the pressures of the industry. So yeah, I'm working on the next thing. I have an idea for something else, what might come after, but if I'm pulled in another direction, I might follow it.
I love that idea of writing to interpret your own experience, and maybe that interpretation helps other people understand their own experience. And also this like writing as a travelogue of your imagination. You plop down in a place, what's around me? I mean, it comes from you still. That's interesting to me.
Can I add one thing, Cody?
Yeah.
Because as we're all talking, and I'm also realizing that it doesn't, that wanting writing to come doesn't mean that we don't have a goal, that we don't have drive, that we don't want that shit. I'm gonna say that shit because there's been times when I did
shit.
I said it. But when I remember not selling Grace after first round, second round, third round, I was wrecked. That was my goal. That's what I wanted, But the difference is it didn't define my life. I was in a fetal position. That's real talk. You know, for writers, rejection is real. Rejection is hard. And I know Oprah, who's the wisest, most successful in her way, she'll tell you have to have a goal. You have to, so many people don't want anything. And it's not that and I don't think anyone's saying that it's not that we don't want those things. You have to have drive to finish it. You have, because you're going to be ripped apart. You got to have a little bit of ego to make it there, because everybody will tell you that you're writing shit or what this problem is or that problem. You have to believe it in yourself, and you have to be able to pick yourself up by yourself and keep walking. And that's real. But what I'm saying is you'll miss the living part if all you see is the red dot. You know, it's like that when you're taking those eye exams, you got to look at the house. You know how sometimes you get floaters everywhere and you're like, what's that? Like sometimes that's the good stuff. So I want to be able to sit in those moments, but also still have that goal and work towards something. But it's not everything. It can't be everything. That would be disappointing.
How do we balance? Yeah. Can I ask?
I think sometimes that's where the stories come from too, is in those moments when there are other things coming in and they move you towards your goal ultimately.
On the craft question, so as you have all learned and honed your craft over time, does that make it easier to write? Sorry. I want someone to tell me yes.
Yes, in some ways, like if you have a practice and you are able to just trust that if you have a bad writing day, if you keep showing up, eventually things will flow. I think just the practice and the discipline and the structure that you make for yourself after a long time of doing this, what is easier is that you know deep down that you can do it. So Natasha was talking about how much it takes, how hard it is, and that you have to have this drive. Yes, but you know that you can do it. I think when I was a young writer, I didn't know if I could finish anything. I didn't know if I could finish a play or a screenplay or a book because I didn't really know what I was doing, and I just hadn't been through the process enough to learn to trust the process. Like sometimes you may go through a week where you don't write anything that is working for you, but you, as a professional, you just keep showing up and you figure it out, and eventually that magic does come. So I think it's just trusting that you have the capability to do it, even if it doesn't seem like you can do it in this moment where everything is terrible. Eventually it will happen. But I don't think that means that it's easier. It just means that you have more confidence, maybe.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the mastery, if you can use that word, that you have over the craft as you spend more time with it, definitely gives you that confidence. And I also think it helps you diagnose your own issues in a manuscript. I just the other day went over what I'm working on now, and it's like, this dialogue is terrible. And I know what it needs, right? Because I've been working as a writer for a very, very long time. Is the magic going to come though that day, right? To help me do what I know the work needs? Maybe not. I think what's hard about writing, and it's such a challenging question when you're asked, and the answer is always, well, it just happens, because it's really true. You can construct a story, you can structure it, you can decide what's going to happen, but writing beautiful sentences, having, moments of inspiration, really having it cohere in ways that are particularly elegant or transcendent or whatever it is you're trying to do, that's hard. But I think once you know the craft, you're not confused by it. And so you can try to harness it. and I think harness the magic. And I think part of it is just sitting with it. It's such a hard thing to do. I did it the other day, like all day. I just sat on my sofa. I really made myself not look at my phone. I looked out my window, and at the end of the day, I was like, okay. And it's just, you know, knowing that that's what you have to do, and giving yourself the tools so the muse can come in and visit.
Being ready for that visit, being a good host. Well, I want to thank each of you for participating tonight, for challenging me, for bringing up so many interesting ideas that are going to be swirling around in my head for a long time. This is what we came together for, to have this discussion. I'm so pleased with how it went. Thank you for being here. And if you do want to say any last words, now is the time before I start talking about what's coming up next in the series.
Thank you, everyone. It was great to
Thank you
see
so
you,
much.
listen to everyone tonight.
Yeah,
Can
it
I
was.
say one more thing? Okay.
Yeah.
do.
For every writer out there, I want you to know that how important it is to invest in your writing. And by that, I mean investing in other people and not just yourself. So when I used to teach in the church community, I would tell people, you know, faith is the currency of religion, basically. Like people will do so many horrible, bad things or really good things because of their faith. It's the currency. In the writing community, in creation, and when you hope to share it with other people, you can start that right now. Like reading other people's work, giving them feedback, creating communities of writers, of readers. Invest in the community, invest in creation, because it inspires you. That is, I believe it's the currency of good writing. I love teaching UCLA Extension. I'm not just saying that because Charlie was here or is here. I love to teach. I can't always because I can't afford it. You know how we get paid, but I'm just saying, but even that investment makes a difference in my own writing. And I would encourage each of you to invest in each other. Buy everybody's books on this panel. If you got something out of this, like you can pick up a book or get it from the library to help support the community. And hopefully it'll feed back into your own work. That's all. And thank you for being here.
Can I add something that I like to tell aspiring writers? I always like to make sure that writers differentiate between their writing and their craft in the business, and don't let the business deter you. Don't let it stop you. It is fickle, it is unfair, and it's business. But your work and your craft is your gift, not only as a talent, but as something that you've been given. And I can speak as somebody who took 25 years to get published. It's hard. I have been in many fetal positions myself, but you've got to hold on to your work. That's yours. So whatever journey you're on, don't let this business, don't let it stop you.
Beautifully said. I think there's a need to find the joy in the process and in the outcomes always. Thank you, Laura, Toni Ann, Malia, Natasha. This has been wonderful. I appreciate it. I see each of you. I appreciate you. And I'm going to close with a little preview of what's coming next, if I can find it. Let's try this. Okay. On April 26th, we have our next in-person event. So this is going to be fun. As Mike mentioned earlier, we'll be at the West Hollywood Library outside. Fingers crossed this rain goes away and we get kind of a taste of summer, or at least of a warm spring. And we are going to be joined by current and former Poets Laureate of the City of West Hollywood. Brian Sonia Wallace has put together a fabulous group who will be leading our attendees through, call it Poetry Spa. And you better come to find out what it is. That's April 26th, 6 p.m. And then the final event of the spring season for WeHo Reads will be on May 3rd, Just a week later, it will be about motherhood, and it will feature the amazing Amber Flame, Gerda Govina Ituarte, Louisette Resto, Carla Samath, and Colette Sartor. So a fabulous panel. I'm very much looking forward to it. That's it. Thank you to our writers tonight. I am so happy that you were able to be with us. And everyone, go find some dry and some fun with the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great to see you all. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.